$200. For supporters, for those of you and others who can afford to pay $350 instead of $200 for, again, a full cadre of speakers and breakout rooms and opportunities, your $350 will help us provide scholarships for those people who cannot afford the fee in light of coronavirus and or the location they're in the world. Our economy is all over the place. So we want to be sure that we have a cushion to make sure that everyone can come. For those who've already made payments for the in-person conference, you can roll that over to 2021, ask for your $200 or $350 to be taken out of that, or you can request a refund. So whatever works for you, that's what's important to us. But I can tell you, and we have our conference committee, Hallie McNabb, Joanne Skinner, Beth Koch, Dulce Torres, and I don't think Vikram Bhatt is here with the time difference, but we've all been working really hard just in the last 24, 48 hours to figure out, okay, how do we make that, what is this going to look like? And so we will make this a great conference because, as you'll hear, we have amazing speakers, and we just incredibly exciting, the blend of presentations from DEIB to looking at how we're shifting coach education, the changes in the competencies, what it looks like, what it sounds like. Getting together to have that sense of community is just going to be one that we have to do this way instead. And I know a lot of people are shifting over to virtual. And the only other thing I want to add is if you need our support in your school, I've been doing virtual training for about 15, 18 years. I am happy to help anyone who doesn't know exactly what to do to make the shift. ICF is also supporting. They have a number of schools who are willing to help others. So that's what we're here for. We're a community, and please just reach out if you need anything. So I just want to take a couple of minutes, since we have three presenters actually. Any specific questions? Eliana, yes, we are recording. Thank you. That was what I missed. We're recording everything. So that's what you will get for your small fee, is a recording of everything, in case you can't be there due to time zone or schedule. Any other questions? Yes. Patrick, I know you are presenting, and yes, I did get your email. I think it was the days that I actually told myself I wasn't going to answer email, and I put my away message and they weren't coming in. So thank you. So we do have great speakers. Other questions at this time? Okay, well, I appreciate your patience in the time that we need to just kind of figure out the details. And we'll reach out to all the speakers for those of you who are here. And now I'm going to turn it back to Jason, so Jason can introduce our speakers.
All right, thank you, Jody. We have 3 presenters and 2 presentations today. And the format is going to be just the presenters will have about 10 minutes to share a bit of what your presentation will be about. And also I'll ask you to introduce yourselves a little bit more about who you are, and then share about your presentation, and then we'll have a few minutes for a couple of questions after that. And Akiko, we're going to have you go first, and then Simon and Amy, you can go after Akiko. So, hello, Akiko. Nice to meet you. I haven't met you yet, and so welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jason, and thank you, Jody, too, for making this happen. It's such a privilege and honor to connect with all of you. My name is Akiko Maker, and using the 10 minutes that I have, I was trying to think, okay, how best to use that time. So I'm gonna do just a few things using my time here. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. And I don't know how many of you would resonate with me, but I'm an extreme introvert with a very extroverted work projects day to day usually. So I'm not very connected to fellow coaches, locally and globally. I mean, I am connected to some colleagues, but I'm not a very socially active person. So this kind of opportunities really kind of push me and challenge me to speak to a wider community of colleagues. So thank you. And I want to get to know you, and I like for you to get to know me. So a little intro about myself, and then I have just 3 or so things that like a little bullet points kind of things that I like to touch on today, since I have very limited time, just to give you a kind of a big overall picture of what it is that I'm wanting to bring to the ACTO conference. So a little bit about myself. A little bit about myself. I don't know how many of you can just tell from my first name where I'm originally from. Akiko is a very common Japanese woman's name, so that's where I'm from. I was born and raised in Japan all my life. I currently live in the U.S. in Minnesota, Midwest part of the U.S. But I've only lived in the U.S. as an adult. So I grew up in Japan my entire childhood until I graduated from college. So I always say I have 2 homes. Japan is going to be always my home. I still have both my parents living there. Of course, I worry about them every day, in this situation. With the spread of the virus in Japan, they're aging, and I can't be with them to help them. So it's really a difficult time for me, but that's my home. And the other home, of course, is the U.S., especially Minnesota. Within the U.S. is really become my home. This is where I live with my husband, Paul, who is originally from Texas, migrated into Minnesota now for over 2 decades. So this is our home. We have 2 children, both in high school, sophomore and senior. And we have a dog, pet dog, maybe is her name. She's a rescue Shiba Inu dog. It's a Japanese breed. So that's my family. And professionally, what I do is that I run with 2 other partners, one of which is my husband, Paul. We run a company called the Intercultural Lens LLC from right here in St. Paul area of Minnesota. So what we do is that we work with various organizations, everything from corporate to government organizations to nonprofit foundations, K through 12 schools, universities and colleges, churches, libraries, orchestra, different kinds of organizations in terms of their diversity and inclusion initiative or cultural leadership development initiative, that type of projects. So we work as consultants, and when we go into these organizational clients, I also function as a coach to many other organizational leaders. So that's what we do, what I do professionally. So I'm just gonna stop there in terms of my introduction. And I'd like to tell you about what it is that I want to speak on at the conference. So my presentation or workshop, I'd like to call it rather than presentation, my workshop is going to be about this concept called intercultural competence and how I propose that to be part of coaches' core competencies. And I've seen a lot of influence of intercultural competence in coaches and coaching work. And that's what I like to share with you. In doing that, I like to talk about 3 things. I'm trying to narrow to just a few things for the time being. So one, I like to talk a little bit about how we can think about this idea of diversity of people. How do we think about diversity? That's one. Two, I like to talk to you about what I call a developmental approach or a developmental lens. What does it mean to approach diversity developmentally? Three, I like to talk to you about this gap, the gap that I see in people's capacity. Gap in capacity between our intention and our actual action or behavior. So sorry about that. I was checking the chat box. So I like to talk about those three things: diversity, developmental lens, and the gap. So when I think about diversity, I propose that, when we think about diversity of people in coaching, there are different ways that we can think about it. So I want to propose for all of us to think about diversity through multiple ways. So one is to think about diversity of people in terms of identity or cultural identities, or some of you may think of it as cultural dimensions. For example, we have diversity of people in terms of how we identify ourselves. So for me, I'm a Japanese, I'm a woman, I'm a mom, I'm an Asian, I'm a Japanese and English speaker. I have a person with hearing challenge. I have a person with a, I don't know, coach training, things like that. So we have different identities or different characteristics that create us, help us be who we are. So those things all create diversity, contribute to diversity of people. And the second way that we can think about diversity is through thinking through the lens of specific issues or topics. So some of us may be concerned with things like, say, working to end racism, or maybe we are concerned with equal pay between men and women, or maybe some of us are concerned with achievement gap of different groups of children in school. So these societal issues really get us to think about diversity of people, diversity of communities, and maybe get us to think about what it means to have an equitable world. So things like that. So topic or issue-led view into diversity. That's another way to think about diversity. Now, the third way that I'm really wanting to add to our perspective is to think about it from the capacity lens. Capacity meaning intercultural competence or intercultural capacity that we all have. How well and effectively can we address diversity? This capacity, it really spans from, not at all to pretty well to really well. So it's a developmental process of building that capacity to address whatever kinds of diversity that we have. So it's another way that I call this type of lens into diversity is developmental diversity, that we think about developmental diversity. We are in the process of developing this capacity to think about diversity, and we are all somewhere in that process of developing intercultural capacity. So we have this diversity developmentally. That's the lens that I'm really wanting to bring forward here with you coach colleagues. So second thing I like to really focus in on is this idea of developmental lens. So what do I mean by that? So it's really about, for me, one of the tools that has been really helpful is to use this framework called Intercultural Development Continuum. And what I did for my PhD, I have a PhD in organizational leadership, and for my study, what I did was to use this intercultural development lens, this framework called Intercultural Development Continuum, to assess how coaches themselves, coaches' intercultural capacity affect the way they view the influence or impact of culture or role of intercultural competence in their own coaching practice. And one of the striking things that I found through my research is that a lot of coaches are concerned about diversity of people because we want to tailor and adjust our services to the needs of each client, right? So when we think about that, if we are only thinking about one or two types of diversity, for example, if we're only paying attention to the cultural identities of the clients, we're missing out on other things. Until we really address the ability, our own ability and clients' ability to navigate through the diversity of people, we're only addressing the identity issues. We're only addressing the issues, that societal issues that we're concerned about. So that's what I'm trying to bring to you to think as coaches. How can we really challenge ourselves to look at the capacity of ourselves to think about diversity? The last thing I wanted to mention to you is this idea of the gap. So through my research and the use of the tool called IDI, Intercultural Development Inventory, what I'm finding is that most coaches, if not all, I mean, the people who really contributed to my PhD studies, I mean, were incredible people, highly regarded globally. And some of the past ICF top leaders were among the group of coaches that helped me through the research study. So through that, I know having an MCC, for example, or having 25 years of coaching experience, or having been a renowned coach worldwide, none of those things really doesn't necessarily mean that you are interculturally capable. So it's a separate thing that we have to really think about. So that study, the results really humbled me to think about this together with my coach colleagues. So the way we see ourselves to be capable, if you think to yourself, yeah, I'm an open-minded person, that I'm open to all the diversities that exist in the world, and I can adjust my coaching to fit the needs of my clients all the way through all of the types of diversities. I'm capable. If we think that, I can almost down to the number, that you are probably most likely behind that ability in a developmental process. You are significantly limited in the capacity to adjust to the diversity of people compared to the way you perceive yourself to be capable of doing. So that's the gap I'm talking about. And at the conference, I love to share more about that, more about the developmental lens, and then more about the gap and how we can actually come to a place to identify where the gap is. I mean, you're coaches, and so we're really familiar with the idea of the gap. And so where do we want to be in terms of intercultural capacity, and where are we actually now? Where is the gap? How do we address that gap as part of the professional responsibility as coaches, so that we can actually help the clients that in a way that we are intending to help them? So I think I'm out of time, so I'm gonna stop here. Thank you so much for listening to my really, really brief and fast introduction of my interest area.
Yeah, thank you, Kiko. That was rich. I just want to throw it out to the group right now. Are there any, or what questions do you have? We could do a couple questions without giving away Akiko's entire presentation, but what questions do you have? You can either take yourself off mute or type it in the chat box.
Jason, this is Pat. I have a general question for you, Kiko, and I guess myself as well. When Jody was talking, I'm assuming we might spread out the conference, so we're not going to be online for 8 to 12 straight hours or something. experiential exercises are going to be different. How are you going to adjust to? Are you going to try breakout sessions? Do we have the capability for that with our Zoom? Or what ideas do you have as a presenter?
Thank you. This is Pat?
Yes, Pat.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Yes, I'm so bummed that it's not going to be in person, because my workshop is always very, very interactive in terms of discussions, and also physically interactive. So I can't do that quite the same way. But I'm familiar with using the Zoom and breakout room functions, things like that. So I am I'm going to try to use that breakout room functions to allow for smaller group discussions and reflections. And then we can definitely use chat box or raising hands, or whatever other functions that we can have. We have through the, Zoom or whatever platform ACTO decides to use, so that we can keep it interactive as much as possible. And I am very comfortable with Zoom. Thanks for the question.
I have a question about the,
Akito?
sorry, who's speaking? I don't want to interrupt.
Indiana, you can go how I go.
Okay.
Okay, I'll get you next, Eliana. I see your hand.
Okay. I just wonder if you could speak to how the developmental lens supports people in working with people on who might be across some difference to them. How does that developmental lens support them?
Two things. One is by thinking about, for example, coach training in a developmental way, we can tailor our programs or curriculum to address multiple stages along the developmental continuum process. So
Right.
people come into the learning space with different readiness or different capacity in terms of addressing or even thinking about diversity. So how can we tailor our teaching to address this type of capacity, or this level of capacity, or this level of capacity, so that we can engage everyone in a learning process, but everybody is learning something appropriate to them in terms of how they can improve their understanding and improve the awareness of diversity of people. So that's one. And then two, this is not specific necessarily to coach training or coach education, but I find this developmental lens to be very helpful in terms of us or anyone sort of being aware of our own judgment. So for example, I mean, even in this challenging time, as I watch media, news, or as I read government or CDC or World Health Organization announcements, things like that, I always think about, okay, who is this announcement speaking to? What is this announcement or message? To what end is this message being projected? So when I think about developmental lens, we are thinking about who are we and who are they. So who are we speaking to, and who do we see as the other? So everything about how we view diversity in terms of, for example, us and them dichotomy, or are we really focusing on the fact that we are all human beings and ignoring the differences? Or are we really paying attention to the commonality that all humanities has, as well as nuanced differences that all people have? I mean, so what is the capacity along the developmental process really impacts how we communicate, and what we communicate to whom and in what way. So developmental lens really gives us the ability to think about where the message is coming from and where the messenger, each person, is coming from. So instead of saying, wow, that person is judgmental and that person is an evil person, I mean, judgmental view in itself may not mean that person projecting the judgmental statement may not be actually an evil person. So it really, developmental lens really allows us to look at people with humility and understanding and positive intent.
To your clients, you would be able to relate to them positively.
I'm sorry.
You would be able to relate to your clients, like the questions that you ask and the statements that they make, you would be able to hear them through a different, you're suggesting that you'd hear them differently and you'd ask different questions if you were
Yes.
adopting
Yes.
okay.
Very much so. Very much so. We try to hear the client from where they are speaking from, but without really thinking about this intercultural development process, we're limited in that because there is a gap, no gap between where we think we are able to capably hear the clients from where they are coming from and where we are actually hearing from ourselves. There is no gap between them, and we just can't avoid it. We're wired to have that gap. So first step in addressing that is to know there is a gap, and then to know where that gap is for each of us.
When you speak about the gap, I listen as unconscious bias. We are talking the same thing? And are you going to bring to the conference some methodology or some tool to bring to conscious the unconscious?
Thank you. Elena, is that your name?
Liana, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I will be bringing a tool to introduce to you what the tool is that I use, which is called the IDI, Intercultural Development Inventory. I teach people how to use it. So I didn't invent the tool, but I do teach people how to do it and how to use it, train them and certify them. So that's the tool that I can introduce to you, and that tool is based on the framework that I mentioned called IDC, Intercultural Development Continuum. That's a theoretical framework that's out there that you can even Google if you don't want to wait until my presentation. And you mentioned unconscious bias, and the gap that I'm talking about is not exactly the same as unconscious bias, but you could think of it as a type of bias because it's a gap between our self-understanding and the reality. So I don't know, you may see a connection to or relationship to what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, if you're familiar with it. It's the gap that we have, or the bias, if you will, that we have very naturally, natural bias or natural gap that we have between our self-awareness or self-perception and actual competence. So it's a gap in our own understanding of what competence we have, what level of competence we have. And the more competent you are, the more accurately you can assess the gap. So it is a type of bias that we have. Yes, that's true.
Looks like Michael has a question or a comment.
Yeah. Hi, Akiko. Will there be an opportunity for people to take the IDI before your presentation?
Thank you, Michael. That's a great question. It is not set up that way at this point. Just because this was going to be a conference presentation, I don't do that for a conference presentation. I have done. I have developed this program called IIMC, Intercultural Institute for Master Coaches, and I'm changing the name to Master Flow Coaches. But regardless, that's a program that I've run twice so far. Once in the U.S. and another time in Japan. But in programs like that I run, I administer the IDI to the learners and use the data from the input to actually address the learners or the program participants' learning. So I do run those programs, but I'm not doing that for the conference presentation specifically. But you will learn the concept and the framework, which is a great start regardless.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. Is there one, we got time maybe for one more question for Akiko. So any other questions before we shift?
Yeah, I didn't get the name of the assessment. If someone can write down, because my English some not so good, please. Thank
If
you.
somebody would type it, it's Intercultural Development Inventory, IDI, Intercultural Development Inventory.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. There it is. Thanks, Allie. Well, Akiko, I can, just in that brief conversation, there's a lot of depth of learning that I can tell you have done in this whole area, and just real excited that you're bringing that to our conference in June. And so thank you so much for being with us today. And I know you have to jump in a few minutes, and so really appreciate your time today and your expertise. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you everybody for having me, and so wonderful to connect with you. And I do need to leave for another Zoom meeting, so thank you so much. Bye from me.
See ya. Yep, aren't we thankful for Zoom? Just living on it here the last couple weeks. I have, don't know about you. We're gonna shift now to Amy and Saima. And if you two would introduce yourselves briefly, and then you have about 10 minutes to talk about your presentation, and then some questions. So the floor is yours.
The virtual floor. Thank you,
Yes.
Jason. Thank you, Jody. And what an amazing opportunity just to drop a little taster of what we might be speaking of. So some of you, and I'm seeing beautiful familiar faces, will know that the ICF Foundation has been part of the family organization of ICF since 2008. So Amy and I are here representing, I suppose, one of the grandparents of the family organizations. And of course, there are several others that have just been born in this last month or 3 months. A tiny introduction for myself, and I'll let Amy say a little more about her too, and then we'll speak a little about what was our intention for the time we are going to be together in June. I'm sure you can go to LinkedIn or look on a website for who and what I do. I deliver coach training programs. I hold an ACTP. As an MCC, my commitment and passion is, and I truly believe that, you know, coaching and social progress are inextricably linked. There is a huge vision that I hold that humanity will be richer for the potential that we draw from the people when we're having this quality and this level of conversation, and the ability to be able to do that, you know, for ourselves through coaching, and then of course for each other. So very much like the ACTO stand, and I knew a few years ago that so resonated with me, our diversity, our inclusion, our belonging stand. It was for the first time an explicit version of what I held in my heart and held in my hand. So to you, I am grateful for bringing it alive in words and on print. My business is run alongside my husband for over 20 years. We're in our 21st year. It's about the same age as our son. And I think that's all I want to say for now. And let me hand over to Amy.
So hello, everybody. Thank you, Saima. Saima is one of our board of trustees, and we are so honored and happy to have her amongst a rich group of coach leaders and those in the nonprofit world who are very passionate about what coaching can bring to social change organizations. My name is Amy, and I have been with the foundation as a staff person for about 5 years. It has been an amazing journey. I learn more and more every day that I probably should do coaching training someday, because I instinctively feel that I have the heart of a coach. I just don't have all the skills yet. So perhaps my ACTO time at the conference this year will enrich me and point me in additional directions for life. I will say my background is in marketing and nonprofit development. And so those, ironically, are the two roles that I play within the foundation. And we're just really honored and excited to be a part of ACTO. As training providers, you all are bringing such beautiful things into the world by bringing in more coaches. The foundation, much like ICF, really strives for the vision of that coaching can create a thriving society. And we feel like we're the heart and the front line of that in the world today. And so thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for just thank you. I have a lot of gratitude now that I'm home working remotely. I don't know if you all are the same, but just really grateful. The extrovert in me is super happy to be talking to people today, and just grateful as a whole that we have the opportunity to present to you all in your conference this summer.
So thank you, Amy, and thank you, Jody, Jason, and the team for giving us this opportunity. In its simplest form, our conversation was designed to be a dialogue. In fact, I think Amy and I were going to do about 5% speaking, and you were going to do, and Dr. Pat, yeah, it's going to be now in breakout rooms, about 95% of the active contributions toward our conversation. So here was the dialogue that we were wanting to have, and we'll have later this summer. There's been an emergence of people that have just realized that we're here to make a difference, that we want to make a difference. Yet we're entering a time in history in this world where, and of course, this challenge has just dawned upon us in the last 2 or 3 months, where we as humanity are facing, some huge challenge. I don't know how else to describe it. And yet what I'm also realizing and acknowledging is that one person making a difference doesn't always seem to make the difference. Yet we're all committed and wanting to make those difference. So we're curious. We're wanting to invite you to work together and understand. And the question we're asking is, what is coaching's greatest possibility? What is coaching's greatest possible contribution for humanity and the planet? That's the one question that we have for you. And of course, I say again, in honoring the ACTO stand, this is, for me, diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity at a completely holistic level, so that all of us have this level of fairness that we so desperately strive for. So in the conversation, we want to be able to learn and understand from you, where can those small differences come together? Where can we make those small differences in such a way that they can be impactful, they can be scaled, they can accelerate and amplify globally, so that we are fundamentally making a massive impact in society? We as a foundation have a North Star. The conversation we're creating out of this North Star is to accelerate and amplify social system change. So if there was a focus and a direction, that's where we're heading. Social system change, and through organizations, be it parochial, local, or national, global, organizations that deliver system change socially to the end user, to people who would really benefit from the great work of charities, NGOs, not-for-profits that they do. So our intention, and as a complete board, and Amy let you know that there are 9 of us, as a complete board, here's what connects us. And I'm going to use some South African Ubuntu, you're familiar with Ubuntu and perhaps some of your teachings and trainings. I am because you are. And so in that context, I don't make sense on my own. We don't make sense on our own. And I'm absolutely delighted to know that each of us in our own unique way actively contributes, be it individually, be it professionally, be it through your schools, to one form of pro bono coaching or another with people that could really benefit from it highly. The conversation then we're creating, or the place that the foundation is creating a global stamp upon, is we're going to become, and I'm properly putting my neck out here, and Amy's going to very quickly wind it back in again. We are going to become the first organization as an ICF family organization to be able to actively measure social return on investment. Now, there is no secret here amongst us that coaching works. What we want to be able to create is clear directive that social return on investment through the work of coaches, professional work that we give, also has a huge impact, so that the end users can have this huge ripple effect across their networks, across their communities. Now, what is our intent with that? We want to be able to go to large multinational global organizations and invite for them to pop coaching in as a line item in their profit and loss, in their business strategies, that says something along the lines of, here's the difference coaching makes, and now actively be resourceful for it. It's not an add-on. It's not an expectation for it to continually be pro bono. It's a business case that this works and humanity, society needs it. So that's a little bit about the type of conversation we were going to have. And in fact, we're currently looking to run a few programs and run a couple of pilots where we can start measuring the SROI. And so if any one of you might be running your own pro bono initiative, either by yourself or through your school, get in touch. Let Amy and myself know what you're doing, and we'd love to hear more about what could be possible. What is it you're doing? That's pretty much all I wanted to say, I wanted to add, and I'm going to hand over to Amy, who can say a little more about us and how we reach out to the rest of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Simon. I think that was so well put and articulated. At the beginning of March, our trustees came together to set our strategic plan, and it just gets more and more exciting for us every year because we see the potential. And I know you see it too as training providers through your students, through what you've seen happen over the years you've been in your role, how coaching is already changing the world, but what if we apply it to impact social change organizations? It's not just making a bottom line dollars, it's impacting lives across the globe. And I know there are so many amazing projects that are happening, but the foundation feels really passionate about our role in connecting, equipping coaches, chapters, training school providers, our family organizations even, to really being prepared with the data, much like you all do with students, right? Preparing and sending them out into the world. We see our role very much the same. We are really excited about kind of 3 buckets that we focus on as a foundation, which is really working to engage a wider audience, not just within ICF, but globally. We want to create opportunities to create societal impact, and we're looking for those. So like Simon said, if you're doing projects, with SROI, let us know. We want to share what amazing things are going on in the world. we also want to support social impact. You know, as well as I know, you can't have an organization and doing great work if you're not financially sustained. And so we're always looking for new opportunities to partner and work within chapters and ambassadors and supporters who are in line with our mission and our vision. And last but not least, we want to be a place where people could connect. Every coach that I have ever met as a non-coach, it is so obvious that you all have the heart of helping others. It's the act of service. It's why I suspect each of you are passionate about the work you do with your students, because you're passing on that passion. And so we want to know what's happening in the community. We want to connect with you, and we want to do more and better as we all focus together. So just a quick tidbit on that. I think we're a smidge over our time, so thank you for your patience. And letting us go on. As you can tell, we're very excited and passionate, both personally, and it's hard to slow your talk down when you're excited about the work that you're doing. So thanks for your patience and listening.
And just honoring Akiko, I know she's just disappeared. Both Amy and I might be described as raging extroverts working in the field of introverts. So.
Right.
Well, thank you, Amy and Simon. I think we have time for maybe one or two questions, and so let me throw it out there to the group. What questions do you have?
What's your definition or the Foundation's definition of social impact?
You know, for us, it's really showing that SROI, so the social return on investment. It is being able to draw a very strong line to how, when coaching is applied in an organization and it builds capacity, it helps that organization have operational effectiveness, is some of the data we're seeing now, helps them with communication, with their teamwork. And when all that becomes streamlined, it creates an impact on humans, on the work, on needs of humans. You know, we've done some work through a project called Ignite with our chapter partners, and it's been really fascinating to see that kind of impact. We think we can do even better in terms of measurements. Ignite is kind of our touch our toe in the water and see what's out there and see what kind of impact can be made. So our impact is looking at, you know, how are we measuring the change that happened within that organization? Sometimes that might be via proxy, right? We have one of our trustees is connected to some World Bank funding and has begun to implement within that funding coaching component. And what they're doing is they're seeing increase in proxy measurements. So things like because coaching was applied in a rural community in Africa, people are understanding how to milk cows differently and better. And so therefore, in that proxy of impactment, we're making somebody's life better in Africa. We're providing more product. We're providing better economic opportunities. And so I think that kind of glazes real quick over your question, but that's kind of some of the pieces that we were really focusing on. As Sima said, that projects that we're looking towards with the social return on investment is really looking to partner with organizations who have a clear understanding of what impact they want to make and how they're measuring that, so that we can come alongside and show them how coaching will accelerate and amplify the work that they're already doing in those measurements.
Hello, Amy and Simon. This is Michael Brazel. I've got a curiosity, and it may not relate to what the foundation does at all, but one of the things that seems to be happening in the coaching field is there seems to be an emerging narrative in ICF and in ACTO and in other places beginning to pay attention to identity, power, and systemic racism, sexism, and other forms of systemic oppression. And I'm wondering how that may be showing up for the foundation, if at all, and what the foundation might be able to do to reinforce that narrative that's happening, that change process happening in the coaching profession?
Amy, you want me to take that one?
I was going to say either one of us. I was going to let you start
Can
if
I
you
interrupt?
want.
Can I interrupt just for one moment? If
Yeah.
you, this is a really good question, and we have just a few minutes, and so if you could
Sure. Quickly do it.
take a couple
Simon,
minutes.
I'll let you handle that one.
Michael, ask the question in its most succinct way. Sorry, I'm completely thrown by Jason going, stop.
Oh, sorry.
No. Michael, go ahead and ask the question just one more time. You're on mute,
Okay,
Michael.
there is an emerging narrative dealing in ICF, in the core competencies, and in the code of ethics, and in the stand that ACTO is taking, and in other places, and beginning in the coaching literature, focusing on identity, power, and systemic oppression. How is that showing up for the foundation? Is that something the foundation can do to reinforce and support?
So Amy mentioned earlier one of our really successful initiatives, Ignite, which we launched in 2017, has been delivering pro bono coaching out through our ICF chapters locally, pro bono coaching through membership into organizations. And what we've been able to do is, through some of that coaching, empower society's most needy, society's most in need. They find themselves in hard times. Toronto is a wonderful example of having delivered and have continued to generate ongoing pro bono support for an organization of women who have come for one reason or another to a place where they just cannot support themselves through abuse, through financial hardship, through more than one unspeakable way. And through pro bono coaching of the leaders within that NGO, we have noticed the difference it has made to the women as the end user, of how they now are able to feel and connect to themselves, their identity, and reconnect them with how empowered they can be in this new life that they are creating for themselves going forward. So our Ignite initiative is tapping into almost half of the chapters that the IC has around the world. We'd like to see more of it. So it's early days, Michael, and we're making some headway into that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Thank you, Amy and Saima. We are looking forward to spending some time with you coming up in June, and so and continuing the conversation. Before we wrap today, a few of you have joined kind of midstream today, and so Jody, do you want to give a brief announcement about the conference, and then we'll say farewell for today?
Absolutely. I'm putting the slide up that we started with to just make sure, because we have many speakers, and thank you, speakers for the conference who are on the call. We will be doing this virtually. We'll be getting emails, information out, and helping all the speakers. But if you're curious and want to know what's happening, the new fees, $200 for an attendee, $350 for those, this is US dollars, for a supporter to help provide scholarships for those who can't afford the fee. And if you have questions, just email us at info@actoonline.org and we'll help you out. So looking forward to being with everyone virtually for this, and thank you again for your patience as we figure out how to shift in light of our new reality of the moment. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. Yeah, a lot of shifting going on for sure. Thank you all for being here today. And next month we still have forums going on. And next month we're talking about power in coaching and in coach training. And so I really hope to see you next month. And so please do take care of yourselves out there, and be on the lookout for further details for the conference in June. And it is really good to be with you and see your faces today. Take care. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone. Be well.
Thank you, JJ.
Bye.
Jason
Have a
and
great
Jody.
day.
Thank you all.
Be safe,
Bye-bye.
everyone.